阿老鼠，这不这吧？巴西。Oh, sorry about that. Wrong language. Okay, learning target for today is to multiply a polynomial by a monomial using the distributive property. So we haven't used the distributive property in a while, so it's going back to that, and it'll be using what we've recently learned about multiplying monomials. Let's get started. Alright, here's the first example. So we have 4x squared times 3x squared plus x plus 5. And it's in parentheses, so we have to use the distributive property. So that means we have to multiply 4x squared by each of these terms. Now, each thing separated by an addition or subtraction sign is a different term. So, we say 4x squared times 3x squared, which is 12x to the fourth, 4x squared times x, which is plus 4x to the third, because we added the exponents, 2 plus nothing there, so that's 1, is 3. And then 4x squared times 5 is going to be 20x squared. So it's just reviewing things we've already done. Distributive property and multiplying monomials. Alright, distributive property again. Just notice this is a negative, so we're going to change the sign on every single one of these we multiply by because we're multiplying by a negative. So negative 6xy times 5x. Remember, do each of these separately. So negative 6 times 5 is negative 30. X times x is x squared, because we're adding the exponents, and then there's no y, so the y just stays by itself. Then, negative 6xy times negative 3y squared. So, negative times a negative is a positive. 6 times 3 is 18. X has nothing to multiply by, so it stays x. Y times y squared is y to the third. Then, negative 6xy times 4x squared y to the third. So, negative times a positive is a negative. 6 times 4 is 24. X times x squared is x to the third. Y times y to the third is y to the fourth. Now, don't forget, none of these can combine with each other because they're all different variables. They are not like terms. The next example will show you how to combine like terms, which we've done before, but none of these are like terms, so we cannot combine any of these. That also goes back to this one here, where x to the fourth, x to the third, x squared. They're all x's, but they're to a different exponent, so we can't combine those either. The variables have to be exactly the same. Here's an example of that. So in this one, we have to multiply each number in front by each number in parentheses. So we have to take the negative 3 here and multiply by x squared plus 7. Take the x here and multiply by x minus 4. So, negative 3 times x squared is going to be negative 3x squared. Negative 3 times 7 is going to be negative 21. Then, x times x is going to be x squared, so plus x squared. And then x times negative 4 is going to be negative 4x. Now we combine like terms. So you have to look at everything that is alike. So here we have an x squared, here we have a number, here we have an x squared, here we have an x. And you have to figure out which of these are alike. So it has to be the same exact variable. In this case, we have x squared, and here we have x squared. Those are the same, so we can combine them. So negative 3x squared plus x squared. Remember, we say that any variable with nothing in front has a 1 in front of it. So negative 3 plus 1 is going to be negative 2. So negative 2x squared. Then the negative 4x has nothing to combine with, and the negative 21 has nothing to combine with. So both of those just add on to the end. So once again, we have to distribute each of these to their respective set of parentheses. So 5x times 8x, 5 times 8 is 40. X times x is x squared. And then 5x times 9y. 5 times 9 is 45. X times y is xy. Then negative 2y times 3x. That minus does count as a negative, so we have to distribute it in there. So negative 2y times 3x is going to be negative 6. You could say yx or you could say xy. Either is fine. As long as there is an x and a y, then it's fine. Then negative 2y times negative y. Negative times a negative is a positive. 2 has nothing to multiply by, so it stays 2. And then y times y is y squared. Now we combine like terms. So here's an x squared. I don't see any more x squareds. Here's an xy. Here's also an xy. Those two can combine. Here's a y squared, no other y squareds. So these two are the only ones that can combine. So the 40x squared stays 40x squared. Then 45 minus 6 is going to be 39, so plus 39 xy. And then 2y squared plus 2y squared. Alright, that's it for the lesson. Now time for the sponge. Alright, here's the sponge. Remember, you have to attempt the sponge in order to get credit. And if you get all 3 problems correct, you'll get a bonus point on the next test. So make sure to do the sponge. Don't forget, take notes on the entire section. Take a picture of your notes and your sponge activity. Submit them to eBackpack. Don't wait until class. Have a good night.